congratulations on those efforts. That is really important, and hopefully we can all learn to engage and support in that way. You did say that you felt like the system wasn't built for us. And we know of someone who I think many of us are fans of, and that's Colin Kaepernick, and some of the work that he's done with taking a knee. He caught a lot of heat during the 2016 election when he said that he wasn't going to vote in part because he felt like the system wasn't built for us. There were a lot of folks, I think, particularly in the Black community, that had a hard time separating the importance of taking a knee and him making a decision that some of us, including you, felt was errant by not going to vote, because you can't change the system that you don't engage in, to your other point. And they all start through. In 1968, we boycotted the Olympic basketball team for the same issue, almost an identical issue to what Colin Kaepernick was protesting.
As they say,
It's 50 years later, right? 50 years later, we're still protesting the same thing.
Yep.
So you wrote this really compelling piece in Time about the importance of athletes not being this dumb jocks, but being able to use their platforms to influence these same issues. How would you like to see these issues evolve 50 years later, 50 years after your protest?
well, I would like to see more of what's been happening. Colin got let go by the 49ers, but 3 or 4 of his teammates they step forward, they're articulate, they're informed, they're unflappable, and they're just repeating the same thing that Colin was repeating, that until the United States makes it so that all Americans have access to power and the access to wealth that everyone else has, we've got work to do. And the injustice is obvious. So they thought that by getting rid of Colin, that the problem would be over, and it's spreading. I saw some of the owners out there taking on a couple of Sundays this past season. So, that whole argument about it being illegitimate and just a slap against our armed forces on one flag, that's BS. We know what it's all about, and we understand what Colin did, and I hope we all appreciate the sacrifice that he did, because it cost him his job.
And I think, what Colin did is it was an example of what I said I felt as a human being. I never felt like America was really embracing us and really saying it like, yo, Black people, Latino people, y'all really are part of this country, and we look at you in an equal way. It's competitive, but the system is not for us, truly. So for Colin to, in this day and age, to do what Kareem did, NBA All-Star Kareem did 50 years ago, and it's like, it was inspiring to me. It's been, if he inspired me, he's one of like a hero to me, from the Colin Kaepernick, because there's been athletes that stepped out like during this era to do certain things, like you see LeBron and the Heat wearing their hoodies with Trayvon Martin still. LeBron does activist stuff, but to put your job on the line and actually lose your job, and really, like you said, Kareem, when Colin first spoke about why he was taking the knee, I blew away. I was like, I never knew that about the third verse of the Star-Spangled Banner. I didn't know that about that. I was just like, whoa. And he was like, look, this is injustices. This is the reason I'm doing it. It was so clear. And he didn't waver at all. It just made me be like, wow, I gotta remember to have that type of faith and strength. And seeing others do it is inspiring. It lets you know, like, yeah, we can sacrifice it. Even if you do, like, lose something, you gain so much more. I told Kaepernick, man, it ain't no amount of touchdowns that you could have thrown, no amount of MVPs that you could have gained that would be more powerful than what he did by taking the knee. Generations will know him forever. He will always be gone.
So I want to stay here for a minute because his actions inspired Halloween costumes. His actions inspired jersey sales. I think he told us that it was the highest selling jersey on the NFL, whatever the sports shop is. Oh, I that's not happening. That's the big bro. So it's like, oh, he's there. Sorry for the hype, but we didn't want you to see the jersey. He did it. But to the point, he did inspire some things to kind of make us spend more money with the league, but what it was supposed to inspire as well was a boycott. That was our ability to take lead. So if we could stay here for a minute, I want to hear you all respond to whether or not the boycott has been effective or what we could do to make sure that it's more effective. I'm saying we can do because I'm assuming none of us are watching football. And you can just hold your peace because I don't want to debate you.
I would have to say that the consciousness has definitely had an effect because now Black people are starting to understand that they have to vote. They have to at least register to vote because that's a threat. That's a threat to all these people trying to use the political process to keep us down. Look what happened in Alabama. Okay? That by itself should give most Black Americans an idea about what the vote is all about. I mean, sometimes they use the political process against us, but when we register to vote and understand what the issues are, we are a tough constituency, as they say, and we can get some stuff done. So just, tell your neighbors, tell your kids, all the people close to you, register to vote. That vote is something that will empower our communities and enable us to get some of the things done that need to be done.
Yeah, and as far as the boycott, first of all, I have to say, it's been hard not to watch football sometimes. And I do watch it on ESPN highlights. I will be very honest and open, but I don't turn on the games, which has been, for me, it's a time to relax and chill out. As you know, I watch it when it's on in the gym, and I go to the gym, I'll turn it off. But that being said,
somebody tweet Colin.
That being said, I do believe, as Kareem said, in the political sphere, but also on a financial level, we've shown our power by boycotting the NFL. To see that percentages go down. To me, it was just as simple as like this guy standing up for humanity and saying like injustice, people are dying just for being Black, and he's speaking out about it, and he's only taking a knee. He's announced that it's not against the military. He's announced that it's not against all the patriotic ideas, but it's against what American injustice has been and why he's doing it. And for a league to ostracize him and boycott and blackball him, for me it was clear. It's like the store that treats Black people wrong, treats Latino people wrong, treats poor people wrong. I don't want to go to that store anymore. You know what I'm saying? They might have the best food, and I'll really miss it. I don't want to go to that store. Plus, I'm an NBA fan over it. That bad. You did not watch the ball. You really chuckled that NBA was doing this. But ultimately, I'm glad that we are, that we're showing our power by boycotting, and that, actually the guy that's running the country right now.
45.
Yeah.
45.
The fact that he even kind of helped the situation by being ignorant and saying some things was kind of helpful too. So I'm just glad to see us show our power economically, and really, those are some of the things that you all did from eras before. Boycott. You mess with their money, boy. Things start shifting. You see, they start talking about, we're gonna give some money to the communities now, and we hear that that's not even really like solid money what they're saying they give to the community, but at least they bucked up a little bit. And at the end of the day, the owners showed me that they really have the mentality of owners in many ways, slave owners, a lot of them do. And by their comments and the way they talk about their players and people who work for them. So that being said, it's hard for me to wholeheartedly support an organization corporation and things like that.
So you brought up Orangey. That's my vice president. And so I wanted to ask you about the sentiments you have when you hear, and I really it started before Donald Trump, but when terrorism is pretty much, they make it synonymous with Islam. What is that like for you, especially to have to navigate that space? Like first you have your Muslim, you have Muslim friends and family members, you have, folks who you don't know but you know should not be labeled as terrorists. That has to be difficult, particularly when you know that homegrown terrorism is higher and they look like Donald Trump.
The whole idea is consistent with the mindset of the people of the Republican Party, really. They've come to a point now where they have to decide whether or not that people who don't look like them are to be treated as their equal. They don't like being faced with that choice. So Donald Trump is the result of that quality for these people. Most Americans are pretty cool with other Americans not being the same color. All they want to know is if you obey our laws and respect our traditions. Everyone that can do that is supposed to be welcome. But that hasn't happened, especially in our case, in the case of Black Americans. So that consciousness should enable us to make wise choices as to what we do politically and who we back and what we prepare our kids to know and deal with so that they can be successful. I think we just have to keep that mindset and keep that awareness, because without that, we step into those traps.
And Rashid, in your last answer, you talked about making it said stand up for something, but that is also a song that is now nominated for several awards, including Grammy, WMC Image Award, Critics' Choice Award, written for the movie Marshall. And it's crazy how the timing of the release of the song is so needed, whether we're talking about Take the Knee, or we're talking about Me Too, or we're talking about the ignorance put forth towards our Muslim brothers and sisters, or building a wall, really about our Latino brothers and sisters. Talk about how folks can really use that as a mantra to remind themselves that they don't have a choice. They can take a knee.
Right. Yeah, I just believe that this is the time when we started, we said, when we talking about activism, to me, like, this is more than ever in our lifetime that I've seen, this is the time that we have to do something. We have to do something for one another. It's like, you don't have to be, like I said, you don't have to be Dr. King or Kareem-Abdul Jabbar, or, we all have some type of power to stand up from where we are. And that's just identifying something that we see wrong, or something that we know, someone that we know we can help, and just really sacrificing. Like the people that we celebrate sacrifice. They were like, look, I might lose this, I might lose that. I'm gonna have to dedicate my time to this, but they sacrificed. And the whole thought of stand up for something is just to awaken that night in each and every individual who say we have purpose. We got purpose on this planet, and it ain't just about our likes. It's on Instagram. It's not just about the awards that we get, but it's somewhere in empowering each other and encouraging each other. It's like when we get on this walk back to God, if we go on this journey to move closer to God, we got to do it like together, like with arm in arm and hand in hand, like sometimes in front of each other and beside each other on that journey. So that's what really stand up is something is empowering. It's like whatever movement, it might be about the environment, it may be for animal rights, it may be for Black and brown justice, it may be for the LGBT community, it may be for Islam, it may be for just some of the mental health, or just some of the homies in the neighborhood need jobs. It's like one of the things my mother always said. One time I was like really down and out because I had this role as Green Lantern in Justice League, and then they pulled the plug on the movie. So I was sitting there kind of like down. I was, like, damn, my friends had bought me like Green Lantern doll. And I was sad. I was sitting in the bed, like I was in the bed for like a day or two. And my mother called me and was like, man, I hear it in your voice. I know you're sad, but go out and do something for somebody that's gonna make you feel better. And I was like, I don't believe that, you know. But anyway, I went out that day because somebody called me to go do something. And that's why she actually called me, was to go up here to this high school and talk to some kids. And I just was like, man, I'm in the mood, I don't feel good about it. As soon as I got there, it just started like talking to the kids and listening to the kids. Man, I just felt life was better. Everything, you know, it wasn't like all the pain was gone, but I just started feeling better. And it just reminded me that even when you're in the toughest situations, of helping somebody else and standing up for somebody else is really like giving life to yourself too. It's like they're all one connected. When you say one love, that's one love right there.
So one glaring thing that we haven't touched on yet is the Me Too movement. And before we really dig into how it came about with the sexual harassment and assault issues that are running rampant in Hollywood, we know the Me Too movement has really shed the most light on the higher profile folks. I hear black women and heard black women saying that we've been saying this a long time, but now y'all are, kind of on the issue that standing in the issue of combating sexual assault. But there's also another invisible group, and that's domestic workers and kind of blue-collar workers, and you're starting to hear those stories a lot more now. One thing that I don't hear men challenged about as much is on the issue of feminism. And if we know feminism is just the idea that you're someone who supports equal rights for women, I would love to hear you all address whether or not you're feminist, and what is your role, assuming that you are feminist, what is your role in addressing the Me Too movement on all levels, not just for the higher profile among us?
Well, I'll take that. All right, as a Muslim, you look in the Muslim world and women are oppressed. No question. They can't drive cars, they have to walk behind. It's ridiculous, right? The Quran doesn't say that. The Quran says that women and men are partners, one to the other. It says that women have the right to choose their husband, they have the right to own and inherit property, and the right to petition for divorce when they feel like it. That is in practice in the Islamic world. So when you start out with people just off the top lying about what they're doing, you have a problem. That problem goes across into Christianity and all of the other systems of belief that say that women are equal, but they don't practice that. The practical application of everything that they've learned is to keep women suppressed. So we have to get to a point where we can identify that hypocrisy, point it out, and talk about how it's supposed to be. And until we can do that, until I can go to Saudi Arabia and tell the king that this is the answer what you're doing to women, we got a lot of work to do on that level, because it's been so long and men have been able to dominate the conversation with lies, and that has kept women down. It has to stop.
So what are you doing to stop it?
All I can do, I raise my daughters not to be subjected to that. That's all I can do personally. I don't try to treat women like that. I do what I can within the sphere of influence I have control over, and I try to educate people. That's all I can do. But a lot of Muslims don't like me. That first thing that I just said about what the Quran says about women, they don't want to hear that. Not all of them, but a lot of them don't want to hear that because it points to lie to how they live in their life and how they interpret the Quran.
Well, I have a problem with anybody being treated less than. And honestly, like, from what I've known through history, and I'm not a big history buff, but women have been treated less than throughout the history of the world in many cultures. Of course, America is like, the basis of America is white man power. So even a white woman and other women, Black, Latino, Asian women, were treated as second class. that is never, to me, is never acceptable. But I have to acknowledge that I was also part of a culture that allowed certain things to happen. Now, I'm not saying I was a guy participating in some of those things that happened, but just as a man, I feel like I could have taken the responsibility to stop or pull my friends aside and say certain things to them. It wasn't even, not even when I see like sexual abuse going on, you know, obviously I would stop that, or a certain level of sexual harassment, but it's just like the culture of the way we think and the way we think about women and treat women. It's, when I'm talking about like standing up, it's like being able to be courageous enough to tell your homies like, yo, we need to chill on that. Even when they looking at you like kind of crazy, or you feel like it ain't the coolest thing to do, and you know, you still. So I'm saying that to say the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement, for domestic, for every woman out there, I feel like it's really important as men that we show our solidarity with women, because it's easy, you know, when we talk about Black and brown justice, it's like, I mean, I just feel that so much. And then we talk about women justice, I feel that so much, but it's important that women hear that from us, because, you know, they fighting for themselves. And the same way we can't, for the fight for Black Lives Matter, it can't just be us. It can't just be Black people, it gotta be all of us. The fight for women, it needs to be men out there saying, yo, we standing up for our women, and we gonna change this culture. Like I said, as far as I know in history, and I don't have any like specific points to say, but this has been a culture that's been going on. So the fact that it's shifting even this quick is powerful. But the shift is, part of it is because of fear to a certain degree, meaning people like, damn, this dude lost his job, so I ain't gonna act like that no more. But it need to be like a spiritual shift, like a mental shift, like the way we shift, the way we think too. Along with, I mean, it may have started in fear, but now we need to get to a point where it's like, I'm gonna treat this person with respect and not abuse my power because this person deserves that. Not because, oh, that person lost a job over there, so let me not flirt with this girl no more. It's just like, but it's gonna take us some time to get there. It's just like what racism has been, treating women as second class in many cultures has been so long. It's gonna take time, but this shift has been powerful, boy. People scared out there.
I just read an article by a woman author, and she was trying to deal with the conundrum because she remembered when she was in her early teens, how she got harassed by the Black guys in her neighborhood. But then she had to understand that the Black guys in her neighborhood were being harassed by the police and everybody else, and part of that is what they were directing at her. And you know, it can get very complicated. But the consciousness has to evolve. You know, we have to understand that women are indeed our partners, equal one to the other, and that's the only way that we're going to make any progress.
But just so we're clear, can you let us know?
I'm a feminist. I had a t-shirt that said,
I just want to know. Okay.
I'm a feminist. I had a t-shirt that said I'm a feminist before I knew the real definition. I knew I was a feminist because of the way I feel about my mother and the way that in itself made me like just understand, and the way I look at women is the love I have for my mother just gave me the foundation I needed to conduct myself with women. And I know that, like I said, I don't want anybody to be treated less than. So yes, I'm a feminist, and you should listen to the song I like, and you'll know that I like it.
First of all, I'll fight you later. Okay, okay, I'll start for me. What about you?
Well, I have no problem supporting feminist causes. None whatsoever.
Okay, well that's a great way to end this portion, Michael. You said we were out of time. So we're gonna, I think, break for a second. They're gonna set up over because we're adding 2 people to the panel. Don't leave. It's only going to get better. And right now, I guess I'm gonna fight Rashid about the light since he doesn't hurt at some point. Hi everyone, it's been so long. Last book. So welcome back to the stage, Common and NBA All-Star 3. And we have two dynamic persons to add to the conversation today. And the first I want to introduce is Dr. Kelly Lytle-Hernandez. She's one of the nation's leading historians on race, policing, and incarceration in the United States. Her award-winning book, Migra, A History of the U.S. Border Patrol, explored the making and meaning of the U.S. Border Patrol, arguing that the century-long surge of U.S. immigration law enforcement in the U.S.-Mexico borderlands is a story of race in America. She has a new publication, City of Inmates, Conquest, Rebellion, and the Rise of Human Caging in Los Angeles from 1771 to 1965. It's an unsettling tale that spans 2 centuries to unearth the long rise of incarceration as a social institution bent toward disappearing targeted populations from land, from life, and society in the United States. Please welcome Dr. Hernandez. Last but certainly not least is Dr. Tyrone Howard. Professor Howard is a professor of education at UCLA in the Graduate School of Education and Information Studies, Urban Schooling Division. He is also the director and founder of the Black Male Institute at UCLA, which is an interdisciplinary cadre of scholars, practitioners, community members, and policymakers dedicated to improving the educational experiences and life chances of Black males. How many of you all know we need that? He's also the director of Center X for the past 7 years, which is a consortium of urban school professionals working towards social justice and educational equity in transforming Los Angeles schools. He has stepped down as the director to accept new responsibilities as the Graduate School of Education and Information Studies Associate Dean of Equity and Diversity and Chief Diversity Officer. Okay, so let's dive right in. I want to talk to you, Dr. Howard, about the difference between equity and equality. It's a conversation that is being had, I think, in many like Black think tank spaces, but for the purposes of this audience and kind of setting the tone for this next part of the conversation, I feel like I'm sitting on 5 phone books all day. I'm calling it NBA All-Star career. Okay, I'm sorry, I got a little bit of ADD, but equity versus equality. Talk to us about the importance of that distinction and why we should be pushing for equity.
Plain and simple. Thank you. Plain and simple, this is about recognizing that equity acknowledges the fact that not everybody starts from the same thing. It recognizes that everyone does not have the same history. It understands that everyone does not have the same set of experiences. And so what I oftentimes say is that equality assumes that if we give everybody the same thing, that we'll still have the exceptions that we see. So equity is critical because it acknowledges past acts of discrimination, it acknowledges past acts of oppression, it acknowledges past acts of degradation, dehumanization, deculturization. So part of what we should always be pushing for is equity because it makes a distinct difference on the past on which certain groups have been denied their basic human rights.
Bring home coalition, NBA All-Star. Because we've been fighting for this for a long time, right? This idea didn't originate with Reverend Jackson, the way we'll push. It didn't originate even with Dr. King.
No, I think it began, I don't know if any of you see the movie Marshall, but it began probably 100 years ago when the NCAA, Black people in the NAACP were trying to figure out how to change things, and they went to Jewish lawyers to help them. That was the beginning of the rainbow right here, because we had to reach outside of our community for the expertise to deal with the issues, and there was some sympathy from Jews who they themselves had been discriminated against, and it opened the door for some communication and cooperation, and that is that alliance strengthened through the 20th century and enabled Black Americans to get an idea of we have to understand the law, we have to vote, we have to do things the right way in order to get the changes in the political system and the legal system that are so essential to our safety and our comfort. They're not working for us. We got to figure out how to change them. So all of those things are related and come together. And until we understand how all the pieces fit together and work to make it work for us, we're going to have these problems.
So I want to turn the page back to mass incarceration, criminal justice reform for a moment. I think we all saw in the documentary 13, talking about the war on drugs, talking about the way in which prison populations increased most often on the backs of Black and brown bodies. After the 2016 election, it was almost like nobody in the Trump administration saw the documentary, or maybe they saw it and was like, "Ooh, those are good ideas," right? But we had what I now call the Department of Injustice. Attorney General Sessions, one of the first things he did in February of 2017 was rescind President Obama's private prison order, which was to phase out the use of private prisons. In May, same year, he rescinds Obama-era policies related to charging and sentencing nonviolent drug offenders, encouraging and actually ordering federal prosecutors to seek the harshest sentences. It sounds like a movie, right? Then, most recently, just this past week, because of his personal hatred for marijuana, let me find out if Joe Sessions has what we don't know. Okay. He rescinded 3 memos from President Obama's administration that declined federal prosecution where recreational weed is now legal in states all over the country. But they're sold for states' rights. Allegedly. Okay. Well, anyway, so the question that I have is, why does it look like we are going backwards? I mean, that's just 3 examples of some of the latest things they've done just in one department. Like, we didn't talk about DOT or the Dakota Access Pipeline. We didn't talk about, the climate change. The dude is on Twitter this week talking about, it's cold outside, there's no climate, something help you understand the weather and climate. But again, sorry, he rants. Back to you all.
I think the main reason that these things are happening is because President Trump represents sentiments of people who want things to go back to the way things were when America was great, when white people control everything, the legal process, all the finances, everything, and everyone else had to bow and scrape to, when blacks were last hired and first fired. That is the nostalgia that they're talking about. So they're trying to move back to that. President Trump wants to represent the Americans who do not feel that non-white Americans should be treated as equals. And that's what we're doing.
Yes. Our president is a settler on fire. He imagined us as living in the year 1896, and I'll tell you a little something about the year 1896. Come on, historian. Let's see, you are too much. That's where I was going with this. Okay.
This is something on my team.
I want to go back to Andrew's first point about the Rainbow Coalition and bring it together what we're talking about here about the history he's trying to bring us back to. There's something that happened on May 17th of 1896 that he triggered immediately when he became president. Now, President Trump, as soon as he took office, as you all know, immediately said, I have all executive authority over immigration control. You can't tell me what to do, the judiciary can't get involved, that I can do whatever I want to do in the realm of immigration control. He's pretty correct when he made that statement. A lot of us on the outside say, that can't possibly be true. There's this thing called the Constitution, there's limits upon your power. Immigration control is very unique and very special. There was a set of decisions that were made in the late 19th century by the United States Supreme Court called the Chinese exclusion cases that were hit a climax on May 17th, 1896. And at that date, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a ruling in Wong Wing, which said that arriving things, but most important, that the U.S. Constitution does not apply to anything in the realm of immigration control. And that the thing called immigrant detention also has no bear, the U.S. Constitution has no bearing on it. Now, what does that mean? That means that immigrants can be detained indefinitely. Immigrants can be subject to torture. Immigrants cannot invoke their rights that we assume that they have because of these sets of decisions that were made and that climax in May 17, 1896. Now, as NBA All-Star Kareem has pointed out, there's another decision that the U.S. Supreme Court makes on that day, and that is the infamous Plessy v. Ferguson decision, which established Jim Crow America, which made it legitimate for the United States government at local, state, and national levels to subject Black folks in particular, but others as well, to an unfair and a brutal hierarchy within the United States. Now, the fact that those two decisions came out on the same day should tell us a lot about this rainbow coalition that we need to pursue. There is a logic that is at work within the Trump administration that he cannot say, I want to take us back to the day of Plessy v. Ferguson, which he does. But he quietly is invoking his powers within the immigration regime to pull us back to that moment. And this is why it's so important for us as Black folks, not only because we have the highest rates of deportation from this country. Black immigrants have the highest rates of deportation in this country. That stays the people in the back. Black immigrants, where's the name? Dr. Black is in the house. Have the highest rates of deportation. Latinos are the largest numbers, but we have the highest rates. We have got to get on the front lines of this issue because all the work that they're doing around immigration control is a strategy to come back and whip back to Black Americans in particular. So I just wanted that rainbow coalition is for me. I'm glad you asked that question.
If I can pick up on Kelly's point, I think it's critical. We're going to stay with May 17, 1847 because if we bring this into the educational thing, May 17, 1954 is the infamous Brown versus Board of Education case. Now, why that matters here, because we're talking about systemic removal. So many folks all the time applaud Brown versus Board of Education as this landmark movement that gave Black folks and other folks of color huge, tremendous, and unimaginable educational opportunities. But when you know your history, you begin to understand something different. And Derek Bell, who's a legal scholar, talked about this, that you cannot legislate ideology. So what happened after May 17, 1954, many states said you can't force us to desegregate schools. Hence the ruling of Brown versus Board 2 in 1955 that said that schools had to be segregated all under the speed. Many districts did not move for 2-3 decades afterwards, but then when they did start to move, what's important for us to understand, for the first time now, you had African American children who were being taught by white teachers. Why is that significant here as an educator? Because then all of a sudden we see numbers of Black children who are labeled as special education students go through the roof. Because now you have folks who don't understand and on some level who don't care about certain children being seen as a problem, so we start to exclude them. So you may say, well, that was over 50 years ago. Why does that matter today? Okay, let's stay within the historical context. Again, I'm sitting next to Kelly, so I got to get my story. I'm going to bring the past to the present. Why it matters now? Because when we look at incarceration rates, this is a pipeline issue. We look at the back end of this. We have data now that shows that we begin to systemically exclude and eliminate Black and brown children as early as preschool now. Preschool. So if you look at the data by Walter Gillen, he says that we look at the fact that Black children make up 6% of all preschool-age children, but they're almost 40% of all kids who are excluded from preschool. I don't know what you do in preschool to get kicked out, but exactly right. Maybe you don't sit crisscross applesauce, maybe something's happening where Black children are being targeted as being problematic. So we put the label on Black children at 3 and 4 years old, and that label stays with children throughout the process. So if you tell me at 3 I'm a problem, if you name me a problem, if you talk about me as a problem, then that's how I'm going to start to perform after a while. As a problem. So that's why one of the things we have to do from an education standpoint is understand that we can concern ourselves with the Donald Trump war, as we should, but our more concern with the everyday folks on the ground with the Donald Trump ideology. ideology is not connected to skin color, because there are folks who look like everyone on the stage who still have the Donald Trump ideology. And what pains me is to see folks who look like the children who are being excluded treat them just as bad as folks who don't look like them. So part of this is about how do we help to maintain the brilliance, the intellectual genius of our young black and brown babies. I'm gonna shout out my man, say Johnny, who was over here earlier. He's 6 years old. He weighs that now, right? He's 6 years old. I was talking to say Johnny, 7 years old. And we were sitting here talking in the back room, and he said he has a dog named Devon. And I said, well, what does Devon mean? He said, you don't know what that means? I said, well, he said he's God. I said, okay, well, okay. I said, what's Devon doing right now that he's at home? He said, well, he's probably sitting at home relaxing and meditating. So I said, okay, so he's going on and on. The brilliance and the genius from this 7-year-old child, right? And there's so many like him in this country. And my concern becomes that when they enter schools, teachers see that not as promise and potential, they see it as a threat. And they seek ways to eliminate our babies. So I say all that to say that, yeah, I'm concerned about the Donald Trump and all the other legislators, but I'm also concerned about everyday educators who just don't see the brilliance and the potential of our young babies.
One of my good friends, David Johns, who's in the education space for some time, has a slogan. He says, teach the babies, and sometimes the babies need to teach us. So say, now come up here and just tell us what's on your mind. And you can tell us what you're talking about. I know you think, I heard about him already. You want to hold him out? There you go, that's yours. What you got?
Put on spot.
Right.
We can all meditate. And then you think about all the all the things you can do to like be positive and stuff.
Thank you, say Johnny.
Thank you, Angela.
You're welcome. And thank you for mentioning him. I have his reputation precedes him. So Dr. Hernandez, you talked about immigration policy a little bit. Under the Obama administration, he was known, he's still not president, even though he left office January 20th.
Okay.
He was known for being the reporter-in-chief. And that's not a compliment, right? Like it was damning. There were a lot of folks in the black and brown spaces and Asian folks who thought that Obama era policy on immigration was awful, and it wasn't great. But now, it's really bad. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we can be doing to just be, like we always talk about, stay woke, about being woke and working woke in this space, if we really are going to break down the barriers that prevent us from acting and functioning as a rainbow coalition, ignoring that immigration policy has just as much a disastrous impact on us. What are some of the things that we could be doing to address some of the very hateful rhetoric around immigration and the actual policies that follow that rhetoric?
Well, that's a really important question. I think I have two responses, and then we'll share it down the line. First is that when this country often turns to its anti-immigrant roots, particularly sort of this expulsion and exclusion of non-white immigrants, the ones who can't be defined as the colonists or the settlers, we are often brought out as the people to defend their anti-immigrant policies and sentiments, saying that, you know, you've heard this before, there's too many immigrants coming in and black folks can't get a job, right? They take off the working class jobs. How about, as UBAA is doing the work, sending our children to college, making us doctors, making us engineers. We don't have to be locked in a certain sector, right? We don't have to compete with immigrants at all times. There's a couple of responses we can have to that. So first, as Black folks, we cannot allow ourselves to be the face of anti-immigrant politics here in the United States, right? They'll always find one, they'll find two, but collectively, we have got to take a stance and we're not going to participate in that. One, for the sort of imagined immigrant, which today is the Mexican immigrant, the Latino immigrant, but also for the fact that we are immigrants as well. We have many Black immigrants here in this country. So I think that's probably the first thing that we can be doing. And the second is that we have often, certainly since the sanctuary movement in the 70s and the 80s, we have been at the front lines of offering sanctuary to undocumented immigrants in this country. We were some of the first undocumented immigrants. When we stole ourselves away from the plantations, we were undocumented immigrants and we were given sanctuary. The Underground Railroad was a sanctuary movement. So we can also participate in the many rapid response teams that have formed across the country. We can ensure that we're doing our best to protect people from removal from their communities and their families and deportation. So that's sort of at the policy level and the advocacy level what we can be doing, but also at the ground level that we can be organizing neighborhood by neighborhood rapid response teams that when they come into our communities, like here in Los Angeles, many of our Black communities are Black and brown communities now, right? So when they come in, when ICE comes in, or local law enforcement, whoever's doing the raid, that we can show up and we can defend our community members, our neighbors, our family members. So I think those are two ways we can get started.
Thank you. I don't know if you all want to say anything about the immigration piece, but if not, we move to Prop 209, was brought up earlier. Go ahead. Okay. So Proposition 209, I'm sure as many of you all know, killed affirmative action policy in 1996 in California. And it was mentioned earlier as it relates to admission rates of African American students here at UCLA. But it didn't just impact college admissions with state schools, it also impacted contracting opportunities, which were bad already and are bad nationwide, whether there's affirmative action policy on the books or not. One of the things that is really becoming very apparent to me is our ability to provide systems of power around and within systems of oppression, whether it's on a local, state, or national level for us. So I want to talk about how we can fight back against anti-affirmative action policy in states, but also what are the things that we can be doing that are proactively creating opportunities for people of color, so that while we're fighting, right, and reacting to the oppression that is, how are we simultaneously creating opportunities to ensure that we actually get ahead?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that question up, Angela, because I think folks are oftentimes speak that we don't understand now, because it's had devastating impact. We're starting to slowly recover in terms of the number of Black folks on not just this campus, but other campuses across this state, even in Washington, there's so many kinds of initiatives that have done the same thing. But I think it becomes one, increasing awareness, so folks know and understand that this issue has had an impact on Black and brown students, but not just in terms of numbers, but also I hear Black and brown students walking this campus who still get the comments directed to them that they are affirmative action admits, despite the fact that affirmative action has not been in place. So they have to walk around with the stigma of somehow being less than, not being as qualified, when they work just as hard, oftentimes twice as hard to get here. That's a lot of I'm also appreciative of the fact that you mentioned contracts, because that goes completely unacknowledged here on this campus. You can't walk north, south, east, or west on this campus without seeing some new construction. The building we're sitting in now was a $100 million endeavor, right? I had the good fortune to sit on a committee where we talked about this, and I said, well, how do we look at whether or not we have women-owned or minority-owned businesses that are getting big money from this building right here? All the building was renovated, that was $65 million. Basketball center, football center, you talk about hundreds of millions of dollars of construction opportunities that don't fall into the hands of women and folks of color. So I think we have to start asking certain questions. I think we have to start asking for transparency. We have to start being clear about this is not just about college admissions. It's about where do the dollars flow in a place where you have a large number of black-owned, brown-owned, and women-owned businesses that don't even get to come to the table to be able to be part of that process. So I think awareness is number one, and then advocacy for those particular entities that we know we need to make sure that they have their voices at the table and have the opportunity to participate in the economic windfall that happens on college campuses all across the state of California.
I'm going to come back to you, Dr. Hernandez. If we had all start Kareem, in the same time piece that we talked about earlier, you talked about the courage of the Mizzou students who, the athletes who protested and ended up getting their president, forcing the president to resign on the college campus. You're talking about contracting opportunities. You're sitting on a committee, but there is nothing like athletes who are bringing revenue to an institution. How would you encourage students here? I know, I hope there's nobody in the administration here, but if not, sorry, I'm Eddie Wright's daughter. How would you encourage students who have that type of leverage as student athletes who are bringing money to the school to use their platforms responsibly to ensure they're creating opportunities for their neighbors?
Those athletes need to organize. I think college athletes need to unionize. So they can get some more funding. Because the guy who runs the NC2A makes about $7 million a year. And when you go to college and on a scholarship, you get room, board, and tuition. And that's it. It's a great money-making machine. Basketball and football fund all college sports. It's not women's gymnastics or water polo or the track team. It's basketball and football. Everybody, you see all the things that they're building. You hear about the salaries that the coaches are getting. You hear about the salaries that the people on the NC2A are getting, and the athletes get nothing. They need to organize. They need to be able to exert the power and influence that they have. They need to understand that. Maybe I think it was just only a year or two ago, the athletes at Northwestern, they tried to unionize, and the NC2A freaked out and really did everything they could to sabotage that. But if the athletes understand their power and understand how much money they're worth, and all these jobs that are based upon them, their talent and their energy, but they're being withdrawn. Once they get to the point where they can defend themselves, this can change. But it's going to be very difficult because they've got a stranglehold and it's about money. They're not going to give that money up. They're not going to give it up. It's going to be a big fight for them to give up that money.
And so in that same lane, Rashid, Prince, before he died, often talked about artists and the importance of them owning their own material. We understand that ownership is real power, right? And while you all are simultaneously fighting to ensure that you own your own material, that you can put out what you want to put out, you think about how Chance, the rapper, put out his own material. What are ways that artists can also leverage the power they have, whether it's a platform or it's encouraging ownership among their peers or among folks who look up to them and their mentors to, how can they ensure that they're realizing that power for our communities?
Well, I think as artists, we first have to become educated, just like any other individual, and that comes from being humble enough to know you don't know everything, and just because you have a big platform or people, you have fans that appreciate your music, doesn't mean you know how to come up with an economic plan for building the right center here at UCLA. So it's important that we sit and listen and get educated from individuals all over who are intelligent, who are for the common good of all. And that's one thing. Then it's also, I believe, identifying things that you are passionate about, that you want to change as an artist, and going and connecting with organizations and groups that can guide you. This has nothing to do with ownership, but when we talk about some of the change that we did with Imagine Justice in the prison system, it was us connecting with Scott Butnick and ARC, which is Anti-Recidivism Coalition, who took us into the prisons. We got to meet individuals and then go back and do concerts at the shows, I mean, at the prisons, within like we did 5 prisons in California, including all women's prison, and we went and visited juvenile homes. But it came to us connecting with these organizations, and those organizations taking us and saying, hey, this is how you do it. So that, I think, is one of the things that we have to do as artists also, is connect with organizations and people who already have established the way to go in that change. And, you know, one thing I have to say on ownership is the mentality of owning ourselves and being like, you know, we know who we are. We own who we are as Black artists, as Black athletes, as brown athletes, as women. We own who we are. We know that we are powerful, and that mentality is important too as artists, to be honest. And behind your question, I want to say, you know, too, I think that a lot of us things that we can do as artists is not forget our spirituality either, as well as Christianity or Islam. I build the same way Kareem does. I'm a child of the Bible, but I still like respect and study Islam too. I'm a Christian, but I love Islamic texts, and I like building with Islamic brothers, and every brothers and sisters, and every change that's come with artists, revolution, movement. We gotta remember the spirituality in it. Like when we talk about the Black Muslim movement or Muslim movement, it was spirituality in that. We talk about the civil rights movement, it was spirituality in that. And I think, you know, more than just me talking about what I want to do as an artist, I also just as a human being want to make sure that I'm clear that the spirituality is what's going to lead us to this change. Like more than anything else, we got a lot of ideas, but we got to remember God first, and God will guide those ideas when we actualize them. So I just want to say that.
We're doing this over there. And I also want, I know we have a few moments for questions, so we're gonna I'm sorry, y'all. False alarm, fake news. Sorry. Dr. Hernandez, I'm gonna deal with you.
Well, I think everything you just said is very true for us as scholars as well, right? So we spend our time gathering up knowledge by talking to others and other scholars. But it's also very important that we own what we do, right? So what we do here at the university, sometimes we get stuck in our little world and we're answering the small questions that are kind of pinged around within the university. But when we as Black people begin to own our minds and our scholarship and our research and begin to ask the questions that matter to us and the questions that will help to improve the conditions of our lives, that's our form of ownership. So here, one of the things that I've been doing is I've been leading a project called $1 Million Hoods, which is a research project. It's community-driven, in which we have gone after and won access to law enforcement data, police arrest data in particular. Fighting LAPD is kind of fun, to tell you the truth, and winning is even funner. And then we take that data and we go to the community and say, look, we've got unprecedented information about how you have been policed, how we have been policed. What are the questions we want to write in? What are the algorithms we want to write to learn something about this data? And we've begun to map how much is being spent per neighborhood on incarceration in our community. So when we find out that there's a neighborhood where we're spending more on incarceration than on education, we want to change that. We've got documentation so we want that there. Begun here to ask questions about what are the impacts of the bail system upon Black folks, and so we've been able to document. Here we have the lead author, Isaac Bryan, sitting in the front row, of a recent report we put out, which documents that not only has $19 billion been levied against people arrested within the city of LA within the last 5 years. Yeah, you heard me right, $19 billion. But of that, the money that's been paid out in non-refundable bail bond deposits is money that our communities will never get back. Black folks paid $40 million within 5 years. That is largely Black women who are going and getting out our husbands, our partners, our sons, our grandbabies. Latinos have paid out $92 million. just within 5 years. Again, this is money our communities and our families will never see again. We desperately need to pay for housing, that we desperately need to feed our children, food in our bellies. So this is the kind of work that we've been able to do by taking control, right, of our own products, our own minds, our own scholarships. I'm not anything to say that very much what we're trying to do here at the Academy as well with our scholarship.
So thank you all so much. For a long time, people of color have been fighting for justice, and that's just the principle of being dealt with fairly. And I would argue to you all today that that is the wrong fight. We should be fighting for power, which Dr. King defined as the ability to achieve purpose. And if we are really able to reclaim our power by fighting for our power first, justice will come with it. We thank you all so much for